Welcome to the Labyrinth. My guest today is Yohan Tengra. This is his fourth time on the Labyrinth. I would like to say that he has played a very important role in the growth of this podcast and has influenced my thinking heavily. He is an anarchist, an activist, a conspiracy researcher, an investigative journalist, and until very recently, a YouTuber. But unfortunately, YouTube has deleted his channel, Anarchy for Freedom, to be in line with their censorship policy of silencing freethinkers and truth seekers. But in this episode, we'll try our best to have a free and open conversation and seek the right answers. If you find this podcast useful, do like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and leave a comment. So, Yohan, welcome back to the Labyrinth.
Hey, Pratham, very nice to connect with you after damn long, man. So good
Yeah.
to speak to you.
And welcome back to YouTube as well, because this will go on YouTube.
at your own risk, huh, buddy?
Yeah, at my own risk. So, how does it feel, man, to be exiled from YouTube?
Man, it's like so much to say about that. Firstly, it's been an amazing journey just putting content out and researching for so many years. So there's a lot of effort and emotion and like so much tied to it. It's kind of like still surprising because it's something that I've had and worked on for so long, and then suddenly one day you wake up and it's all of that is just gone. So since the beginning, I tried to not keep my emotions and my passions attached to that and do it in a very detached kind of way. But the human ego does get in the way, kind of. So I don't know, man. I'm just trying to put a plan forward for myself to be able to still have the dedication and passion to put the truth out, because that's something that will never die. It's something that's inside my being. So thankfully, I had taken steps before I got taken off to, like back up my audience. So I have a WhatsApp broadcast list, and I have like a pretty decent Telegram following and a Twitter following and Instagram following. So as long as I know that like my work can get out, I'll keep doing it. And I mean, the audience is not even that much of a motivation. I'll tell you why. Because I was probably like more hardcore and more passionate when I had 5 followers than I am now with thousands of them. So I've always done this work from an intention to really like alert people to the changes in society that have already happened and are going to keep happening if we keep just like sleepwalking the way society currently is. And that's like the real fuel for me in terms of wanting to do this and get this information out, and not necessarily like how many people are listening to me. Of course, it's like an added motivation. It's encouraging to see that like my work did get out, and because of the traction that YouTube offers, I was able to get in a lot more people. So that's the only disappointment, that had the channel stayed, then there would have been an influx of more people, because I was planning to scale things up and hire a couple of people and like really put in effort to scale my YouTube. But yeah, I guess everything happens for the best, man. We'll figure out a couple of years later what this is all about, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of truth seekers are being kicked out of YouTube. They're being silenced. They're being censored. Even Russell
Yeah.
Brand's YouTube got demonetized, and he's accused of. I don't know. I'm not clear about the allegations. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so basically they try to target people who get too much on point with certain things, or their following just like expands a lot. So I followed Russell for many years, like back in 2015, 16 also. I remember watching one of his interviews with David Icke, and that time he's kind of taking the piss, at like in that interview. But over time, since his heart is in the right place, like he landed up doing his own research, and the content he's put out in the last 2 3 years is really good, especially since the time the entire COVID saga started, to do with in-depth investigative journalism and research around the 5 cents, like World Economic Forum, Gates Foundation, Rockefellers, like that whole level of things. So at least with that, he is doing a phenomenal job, which is probably why they're targeting him, just like they went after Joe Rogan. And it's, I mean, when you understand that the mainstream media is really heavily aligned with the intelligence agencies, like if you study the history of Operation Mockingbird and like government programs where they've tried to put in their own people inside the media to steer the narrative in a certain way. There are even clips that you can find of all mainstream media outlet anchors just like basically saying the same thing at the same time, in the same kind of scripted way, as if someone's tailor made their message and sent them a dispatch or something. So, understanding the background of that, it's not surprising to see such targeted, coordinated attempts to, censor people or malign people or, destroy people's reputation. So, it's something similar that's happening with Russell, and it's not a first. Like, if you see how they targeted Ike or Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, anyone who's just got too much traction and people start listening to them, then they go after them in an attempt to just make the people like implant this thought in people's mind that this person is not credible to listen to, or they have a notorious past or something. So Russell's been quite open about his promiscuity in the past, which is mainly like what they're going after, like the way he was with women and everything. But like we're libertarians, so as long as everything is consensual, it's all good, man. Like smart people won't fall for this. The problem is that there are too many low IQ people on the fence. So they can tend to get swayed, especially if people are not too glued in, and they're just hearing the same message constantly from all sides. Like I had Kathy O'Brien on my podcast recently before my channel got taken down, and she was saying that repetition is the biggest form of mind control. So for someone uninitiated into all of this, who's just like dipping their toes, if they keep hearing the same message, like Joe Rogan, horse dewormer, like constantly again and again and again, or like Russell Brand, same thing. So then it tends to create an impression in their mind that maybe they might form a certain bias or certain negative perception about them. But thankfully, a lot of people are getting it, thanks to things have changed a lot in the last year or so with everything that's happened at Twitter and the entire US election, and Vivek Ramaswamy, Robert Kennedy, like all these people are fighting and bringing the truth out in the mainstream, even Ron DeSantis. So it's like a mesh of positive trends and negative trends. Like there's, positive forces really trying to bring the truth out and getting more people on our side at the same time. The evil kind of entities are, grappling at the power that they have to try and preserve the narrative, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the US elections also, since you brought up the candidates. I'm really happy to hear people like DeSantis and Ramaswamy, especially Robert F. Kennedy. But we see on one side, we see pessimists also calling all these three individuals as controlled opposition. Ramaswamy, a WEF agent, and they try to dig the history of RFK and say, hey, look, there's a picture of him with the Rockefeller or Rothschild or whatever. So how should we deal with this? Can we be hopeful with these people?
Dude, we've had like I really like last time's chat a lot because we got to go in depth into the psychology of these people and how they really operate. So we're really no strangers to them. I guess like you've seen enough since ever since you entered the community of the kind of chicanery and buffoonery that goes on with these people. And I really liked having this guy called Bernard Gunther on my podcast. Before my channel got taken down. So he's basically like studied these people from metaphysical perspective, and he's coined this term called the black pill. Where basically like people who just constantly keep projecting their shadow at everyone who's trying to do any good, and the knee-jerk reaction is that, oh, if this guy is too big or if too many people are listening to him, then he has to be controlled. So they uh, I guess if you study their behavior, they tend to get some kind of joy in being a contrarian on everything. So as soon as some position starts to get some traction in the mainstream, or even like getting close to the mainstream, so to speak, then I don't know, like they just have some kind of ego preserving mechanism that kicks in, wherein they get threatened because oh, like this, if this is going mainstream, then maybe it's not the truth. The truth is in the tinier the number of people who they have. So maybe it's like 3 or 4 of them who believe in this really fringe fucking theory, and the conspiracy movement is because it wants to basically peddle a credible narrative. So a lot of people do go with the truth. Like there's some really smart people in the conspiracy movement now, and the people are trying to bring the truth out. So that's typically what I've seen. Like they get some kind of joy in being in a smaller and smaller echo chamber, and that somehow bolsters their wounded inner child, so to speak. That, oh, we are in the minority and the whole world is against us. So if you just study psychology and try to analyze these people, it does make a lot of sense just coming from that perspective. Coming to the U.S. election, there are, like, no one's perfect, right? Like, even if you see Kennedy a couple of years back, his take on climate change and like his whole narrative with that really did put me off, to be honest. But then looking at him now, looking at people like even Vandana Shiva, the kind of narrative they have is not really that greenhouse gases don't affect warming, but then it's what we do about it, and the solution the globalists and Bill Gates are proposing, that's the problem, which is what everyone should be aligned on, right? Like, whether it's just like the entire virus discussion, dude. You see the same kind of the mindset's the same. So whichever issue you take, it kind of manifests in the same way. So even the virus issue, like, people got stuck on, oh, does the virus exist or doesn't exist, right? But as long as we're all aligned with not wanting mandates of any kind or lockdowns, then it's all good, right? It doesn't matter if someone believes in the virus or not. It's the end outcome and what you're cheerleading for in terms of action, political action, or just like societal action. That's what really matters. Similarly, for the climate issue, I don't think that it makes much of a difference if Kennedy or Vandana Shiva, any of these people, like, really believe that greenhouse gases do cause warming or not, as long as they're opposed to the net zero policies that the World Economic Forum and the UN and everyone are pushing. That's what we really need, right? And then to come into that, and I mean, even if you see people like this Shiva Durai guy, he's kind of trying to make a career out of bashing Kennedy, so I don't like the vitriol, and that if you just see the way in which he behaves online, and he's constantly like trying to build his own thing by taking someone down. I
Isn't
really
isn't isn't he the guy who claims that he invented
he invented
email?
email. Yeah,
Did
yeah.
he?
I think he does present decent evidence that he did. I've not looked too deeply into that to have like a really strong opinion, but yeah, I mean, just like I followed Shiva as well over the years, and he has some great things to say. Like, he's gone really in depth on the climate issue, and he's done great videos exposing that, and even his knowledge about alternative health and just nutrition and everything is pretty kick-ass. But then I mean, I just like to see a sense of unity and people aligned on higher objectives within the movement, rather than this fucking crab mentality where everyone's just trying to pull each other down to get up based on feeding off someone else's popularity or fame or something like that. So there's a lot of these kind of mindsets that we can see in cultural discourse as they're manifesting. I guess what people should have their intentions focused on is the issue itself, and just having this understanding that no one's perfect. I've seen this a lot myself, and again, like, a lot of people in the movement are looking for some kind of savior who's right on every single issue and is going to take them out of this mess. And sadly, that doesn't exist, right? I mean, we can wish and hope that someone like that does come along, but look, we have to make do with the kind of people we have. So with that, I feel like in general, the truth movement should feel great that if you just analyze the history of US politics, the last time it got to a place where people were feeling hopeful and people were feeling optimistic is when Ron Paul ran in the early 2000s, and like, he did help to get a lot of awareness out. Like, Ron Paul is one of the only US politicians who's gone to the Senate and grilled the chair of the Fed and stuff like that. I mean, can you imagine stuff like that happening in India? We're so far behind, right? Like, we don't even have one fucking political candidate who's out there who's echoing our sentiments, or who even understands what libertarianism is or the Great Reset is. Like, barely we had in the entire vaccine discussion as well. After it got so loud and so much effort was put in, there's this one dude who basically questioned in parliament if like the vaccine had anything to do with the heart attacks. So out here, I mean, like, forget about it. Like, this country is basically like really far behind, and it is what it is. Like, we have to accept it for what it is. So like, my political outlook on India is very grim, just considering how things are at right now. But looking at American politics and the trends going on out there, it does make me very hopeful for sure. So I don't think there's much hope with these kind of people. there is hope in the sense that if they are new to pursuing this information, there's a certain time after which they have the ability to expand their mind and to start to think in a more nuanced, logical, rational way, along with having their skeptical side about questioning people in authority. So it's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like you might be familiar with this. A lot of people who tend to go into the paranoid, like wacky side of conspiracies, they have a tendency to go in there, figure out it's wrong, and then turn fully towards like the Shermer, Randy kind of mindset. Where everything's bunk and everything's a coincidence, and like conspiracies don't exist, and these kind of narratives. Where it's not possible for so many people to collude at at such a scale and to create some kind of plot to enslave people. So I guess that the ideal way to pursue this is to go in with both your left and right hemispheres intact, like having a balance between both sides of the brain where we're being skeptical. At the same time, we have our logical reasoning, and like we're looking to rule out logical fallacies basically. And that holistic mindset is what can help us arrive at the truth. And I feel like as I said, people who are entering the movement just recently, a lot of people have gotten, so we need to have empathy for them, because a lot of people aren't initiated into these topics, so it does take time for them to go into things and go down the wrong rabbit holes, and like then figure out that okay, maybe I was misled on this. And there's a big psychological process to go through where they have to accept that, oh, I was wrong about this, so I need to change my mind now. And these things are very difficult. It sounds easy for us people who've been at this for a while, because we've kind of got used to the process about changing our mind and challenging our biases. But if you just imagine where most people are at, uh, they're totally like unaware about all this stuff going on, and then boom, one day they suddenly wake up and they figure out, fuck, I'm lied to about this, so and so. And the governments and the elite are basically deceiving us to such a great extent that it just takes the floor beneath their feet away, and then they just start like becoming really paranoid about everything. Once they're through with that phase, that's when I have the hope. So there are some people who I don't have much hope from, who've been like this for years. I mean, they just like continuous. It becomes like a disease of the mind, where you're just constantly like skeptical and paranoid. I've seen people like that over the years. They just don't change, and they keep like throwing mud at people randomly, and just trying to bring anyone down who's doing anything good. So yeah, I feel like broadly there are these two kinds of people, and hopefully I'm right that like most of the people right now are in the first category. So maybe in a year or two we'll start to see them get a little bit more intellectual and sophisticated with their understanding. But yeah, we just have to keep doing our work. And I feel like the people, when they listen to our perspectives and our nuanced kind of conversations, that's when they can start to change our mind. Another thing I'd like to add is a lot of people, like the way in which they gain entry into the movement is very important. So like if someone got into the movement after listening to someone like Vilas Zagdale, then of course their views are going to be skewed. Like, oh wait, take your pick. There's so many people who like I find suboptimal in terms of research, or in terms of like how they're going about pursuing the truth and spreading it. So it's important for us, people like us, to have a bigger following and a bigger influence on things. So that's how we can influence people to move in the right direction. And it's just getting harder and harder to do, right? Like there's so much censorship going on. You can't even like in peace work on your platform and try to develop strategies to grow it, because it could be taken down anytime. So yeah, it's a pretty messed up situation, and I think they're paying for all the ignorance and laziness and just like apathy that people have had for so many years for not becoming aware, because these things have been going on for a very long time. Voices like mine and many others have been trying to warn about the things that are happening in the world right now for decades, probably more than that. So it's because we didn't listen to people like that that we're suffering the consequences now. And with the way things are going, I think that it'll get a lot worse before it gets better, because clearly, like, we're, at least in this country, we're not where we need to be, ideally.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also quite hopeless when it comes to this country with so many, so many bucks on one side, and even the leftists. I would even they are also, they have their own bucks. who are constantly, licking the butt cracks of the politicians on a daily basis, sending some strange WhatsApp forwards on how this country is becoming a Vishwaguru when you see so much wrong in this country. I would want this country to at least be a second world country. Even that doesn't seem to be happening. And one thing that I'm glad is, even though some platforms like YouTube are getting worse, there are other platforms like Twitter, which is now X, is getting better for the good. So, what are your thoughts on how Twitter has progressed under Elon Musk?
Dude, I mean, to be honest, I was very, very skeptical in the beginning. I think I'd even gone on a couple of podcasts and expressed my skepticism around Elon's background. And I mean, see, if you just like be objective and assess Elon's background, he does have deep connections to the U.S. military and like the InQtels, the CIA's venture capital arm, and they basically helped to create his operation. If you study the history of SpaceX and all of Elon's operations, like they've heavily been supported and funded by uh, different aspects of the deep state apparatus. So that skepticism should always be there. And but I always say that these things are very circumstantial. Like even you mentioned about in the last question, you're talking about Kennedy's picture with the Rockefellers and all. And the last time I came on, I'd mentioned that all of these things are circumstantial, which should take like a backseat when you have higher level of evidence involved. So the main thing to look at right now is what are the actions of the people we're looking at, right? And say in terms of politicians, it's always very difficult to say because anyone who's running for political office, they tend to say stuff when they're not in office, and then when they go in office, like they flip on a lot of the things. Like even if you see Trump's campaign and so many people that people have had hope about, when they've gone into office, they've not landed up delivering, and then it's just like a barrage of excuses. Like Trump was supposed to put Hillary in prison as soon as he went into office, and lo and behold, like once he went in, nothing really happened with that. So I guess like I'm sorry, man. I lost your question.
Yeah.
Like what?
So the
Twitter.
question
Yeah,
was,
yeah. Sorry,
yeah,
my
the
bad.
Twitter thing. Yeah.
So, looking at Twitter's expansion, like with my skepticism initially, uh, if you see Elon's actions with what he's done with Twitter, I think like it's on point with respect to how things have gone, and the ultimate proof is just how much I've been able to grow on Twitter myself. So I remember like last year or two back, I was barely at 3 or 4 thousand followers or something, and ever since then, like especially since Elon took over, and I mean maybe it was coinciding with my case with Poonawalla that helped me get a lot of traction over there. But I've grown pretty exponentially on Twitter, and even like all the threads and tweets and everything that I've done and the videos I've put out there, the amount of impressions and views and everything that I've got over there is pretty like on point. I would say sometimes even much more than YouTube also in terms of getting new people in. So I feel like just being on Instagram, being on Twitter, like I've been able to get more people through these platforms as well. It's not just been YouTube. YouTube was the place more for like long form content podcasts where people would really immerse themselves into something, and you can put timestamps and all of that, so it just makes it very convenient for people to go and explore and check that out in great detail. But to be honest, like it's because there are platforms like X now, and even Instagram is not something I have much hope from. But to be honest, I've seen like Instagram's also reduced censoring
Yeah.
quite a bit. I haven't like heard of any takedowns and stuff in a very very long time. It's been months or probably years since I've heard like something like Instagram acting in a notorious way towards people who are trying to spread the truth. So yeah, it's kind of like you have to make the best of what you have at any given point. So maybe Twitter might change in the near future, but looking at examples, like I was saying, always consider the higher level evidence. So how is Twitter behaving when it comes to Russell Brand? Like they are not caving into government pressure and taking him off. Even Rumble's doing the same thing. Like Rumble got pressured by the British Parliament to take down Russell Brand, but they're not doing that. So when we have evidence, then it takes away all the speculation. Like this is the kind of evidence that people should look at. Like, okay, when push comes to shove, when the government does start pressuring these people, what are they doing? And you know what they're doing is great. Like they're not caving into government pressure, which is exactly what people like us have been wanting, that social media platforms should have a backbone and not cave into government tyranny and things like that. So yeah, with considering all of that, I feel like Twitter's doing a great job, and we should be working harder to grow our followings over there, because it's these platforms. Like another thing I'd like to mention, a lot of people tell me, "Oh, why don't you just make an account on BitChute or Rumble, and everything will be fine." But they're really like talking out of a lot of inexperience plus a lack of understanding of how things work. We don't like really have a shortage of video hosting platforms. We can just upload our video anywhere and share it to anyone. There's like hundreds of platforms to choose from. So it's not the platforms that are the problem. It's mainly the reach. Because I mean, you're not gonna get any new people on our side. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like there is uh, value to be gained out of increasing the knowledge base of the people who are already awakened. So that should always go on, and like we should keep trying to take people deeper down the rabbit hole in terms of exploring these topics. But the main thing is to get more people on our side, and that's only going to happen when we're on these social media platforms that most people are using, right? So we've come in a situation where most of the people, because of the way in which culture and society have worked, they have got hooked on these platforms, and we're trying to like go in there like Neo and basically tune them out and get them to our side. So that's of course going to be a challenge, because they're playing in enemy territory, right? So they're not going to want us over there trying to. The Matrix doesn't want us to unplug these minds that are currently tuned into the system. So of course there's going to be resistance, but we just have to be persistent and keep going at it, because it's these platforms that have the normal ordinary people who we can get inside and take out. And then once we have a big enough following in the millions, then we can be in a position to say like, fuck these people, follow us on this platform, and people will follow and do that. Like, I mean, if you see even Tucker Carlson, or like so many of these people who've been censored in the West, like they have such a thriving culture now of dissent and alternative discourse, like huge podcasts. If you see Tim Pool's podcast and all these people, like they're killing it over there, man. Like they have such huge followings. Even like Alex Jones, for example, he's been deplatformed everywhere, but his show is like one of the most viewed shows in America, probably the entire world, like with the kind of reach he gets. That is despite like not being on any single social media platform. So once we get big enough, then it's we can say stuff like that, like, oh, we have our own website, or you can follow us on these platforms. But out here it's too nascent. Like we are in a very very nascent stage, and probably take us like 50 100 years, unless there's some like really big false flag that changes people's minds and people start questioning things, and then we grow our movement that way. Like the entire, you can imagine like such a huge event happened across the country where everyone was forced to take like these deadly injections and all of that. And despite that, like you can see how much our movement's grown. So you see the level of tyranny that was needed just to grow the movement so much. Like people out here are just really stuck in the wrong issues, not thinking about the things that matter. And yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, the more pessimistic it makes me to even like remain in this country and do shit. But I guess we'll figure out eventually, man. Like what's
Oh,
gonna happen.
yeah. Why do you think we Indians are like that? Do you think it has something to do with our culture or our mindset?
I've commented on this before. I don't think that people out here really understand freedom or are passionate about freedom, because most people are just trying to fight for more money or more free stuff. Like that's the way in which things have been, and I would credit that primarily to our socialist foundings itself. Like if you study how India was from the 1950s to the 1990s and the effect that had on our economy, and it made us even poorer. Like the British really robbed the country and already put us on a economic back foot in terms of India's monetary power. And socialism just made all of that even worse. The problem is that most people vote in a way where they want the government to reward them with free things, and that's a total different mindset compared to how people in America and places like that vote. They vote from a perspective of, oh, is the government going to encroach on my individual rights? Is the government going to lock us down again? Is the government going to mandate vaccines again? That's the last, like, if you just go and survey the mainstream mindset, I don't think it would come anywhere near the top of the things they would consider before voting for a candidate in India. So that's the kind of mindset. Plus, I feel like because of the tyranny of Congress and the entire like socialist rule that they had for so many years, because of that, then BJP was able to propel themselves and push themselves forward as a force that's going to take down and counter all of that and put India on the map again and make India Vishwaguru and Hindu Rashtra and blah blah blah. So that's the kind of narrative that people are stuck in out here, and I think it's just a matter of fact of the kind of issues that people are passionate about in different countries. Like in India, we've never really had a culture of libertarianism or free thought. Like free thought, of course, if you study the ancient Indians, like I really find them inspiring with the kind of texts and the ideas that are there in ancient Hindu texts. But looking at things where it is at right now, it's really, really abysmal to see the level of social conditioning and the issues that people are stuck at. So again, it's only through voices like ours that we can, get these insights out and get these ideas out to get people more passionate about real issues that matter. But then, like again, censorship and all of that. So it's kind of like trying to carve your way out and following your intuition and following your heart and following a spiritual path. That will really pave the way. Because I mean, I've seen it in my life. Like no matter how bad things look outside, there's a force that's, at least speaking from a personal experience, that's always guided me and helped me to be in the right place at the right time, or just make the most of the opportunities that I have to get the word out and make my own impact in whatever way I can. So I always trust that, and I don't try to get too pessimistic about things that are happening outside. Like that's the way it's worked for me, Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't figured out exactly what's wrong with the Indian culture, but is it really socialism though? Because you see that in the West, even in countries like Netherlands, Sweden, which are in many ways more socialist than India, they have a welfare state there, but they have no shortages of brave hearts there. You see, even in a socialist country like Canada, there were brave truckers. You can't expect our truckers or our middle class people to rise up like their middle class. Even a welfare state like Japan has more skeptics than in India. So I don't know, is it because of socialism or something wrong with our psyche? I really haven't figured that out.
You hit the nail on the head. If I was to expand on that in a little bit more detail, we can find more reasons. Like one of the things that pops up in my head is just people's lack of understanding of English over here in the country in general at a larger scale, and the fact that most of these ideas to do with libertarianism and like pushing back on the state and individual rights and all of that, like culturally speaking, the West, and I just don't mean America, but even Europe with Bastiat and a lot of other people, like they were able to popularize this whole notion of individual sovereignty and things like that. Whereas if you study the Indian freedom struggle, like most of the people who were heroes of the Indian freedom struggle, we don't have someone to look up to who is like a libertarian freedom fighter. Whether it's Ambedkar or whether it's Gandhi, like these people are far from being libertarians. Like they had their parts and pieces of their philosophy that aligned with it, but overall they tended to lean towards like this dismantling caste and those kind of issues. They weren't really focused on the individual. Like Ambedkar had some good things to say about trade and money and all of that. So did Gandhi in different ways. But you understand what I'm saying? Like how in the West you have these kind of figures who people look up to, and they're like, oh, the American Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights and all of that. Like out here, if you just see our Constitution, even with the entire like situation around arms and everything, like that's just not been in our culture, right? Like in America you have the right to bear arms and all of that since the beginning, and that's what kept the culture going over there. Like the entire right wing base in the country, which really looks up to the Constitution, like that culture is very important because that's what's helped them to preserve their bedrock of free speech and the right to bear arms. Whereas in our country, like that's never been there since the beginning. So whatever's been passed down from generation to generation is a reflection of what happened like after the entire freedom struggle ended. And if you see the West, like a lot of people have been putting out information to expose conspiracy since a very long time, and that's never been there in this country. Like if you study how early back like Ike and Jones and these people started, it was the 1990s, right? And they've been working tirelessly since then, doing like everything they can to get the word out. And because of that, like the Western world is quite aware about these ideas and they're pushing back. Whereas if you see out here in Southeast Asian countries and all, we've never had these kind of figures who've, and I mean, like Rajiv Dixit comes to mind. He's probably the only guy, but then even his understanding was very limited in a sense. Like he didn't clearly go all the way, and I mean, you can't expect everything from everyone. As I said, he had a great contribution to make for whatever time he did, but then he landed up being killed soon as well. So I guess like a lot of this really comes down to having the right figures who inspire people. Because the way I've seen trends develop, more than the ideas, it's about the personality that the people connect with. So as soon as you can have a person who blows up, who stands for certain kind of ideas, like that's what really pulls the momentum of the people as well in the right direction. So you can't just have it in a bland way where you just some anonymous guy comes and puts certain information out in Hindi and then you expect a revolution tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. Like people were inspired by Bhagat Singh because of the actions he did and the personality that are associated with. And I feel like in the West you have many of these characters who people look up to as historical inspiration, and then there are schools of thought developed over that. There are institutes that try to preserve the work of the people like that. So that's how their culture is developed, and that's why you have a point now in the West where you have so many shows and like so many people tuned into this information, and which is why we don't have that here. Like I feel like that explains quite a lot of it.
Yeah, in the West, they do take a lot of pride in being individualistic and being exceptional. Here, we're more obsessed with the char log kya kahenge, what will people think of us. Even in our own, in my own families, I see people like, hey, don't say this, don't act like this. What will our relatives think? And we are more obsessed with that. And in the West, even if the government puts a lot of effort into shaming individuals, like they did with Joe Rogan, he can
Hmm.
get away with that. But here, something as small as the NCB interrogating Aryan Khan and accusing him of having smoking some pot, apparently, is going to ruin his reputation. And you see so many NPC Indians going on comment section and saying, "Yeah, screw him," and all that. So I think we are more obsessed with that kind of mentality.
Yeah, if you just see the mentality around about drugs also in this country, and you compare that to the understanding that a lot of people in the West have towards drugs, it just makes me want to move right away whenever I have a conversation with you, and we really like get to start to analyze these things because yeah, we're really far behind. There's no other way to put it, and I feel like there's a lot of intellectual maturing to do for a lot of people, and that's not happened till now because. We've not even had the brain power to be able to put these ideas out. Like if you just study the intellectual landscape out here, most people apply their brain power even on the right. If you see towards either trying to show that India was great in our past and we had all these accomplishments, and that's where a lot of the right wing intellectual power goes, and in terms of like finding out scams of other political parties and just like bashing them. And the left, if you see, like with the entire woke agenda and all the propagandizing that's been going on in the schools and colleges, like that's where their mental power is stuck, in trying to come up with ways where they can justify having multiple genders or trying to, brainwash children into supporting climate policies and making children convinced that the world is going to end if we don't radically transform our lives. So if you just study the landscape, like on both sides, we have these kind of issues that people are stuck in, which is why the effort is not really coming in to counter issues that are really threatening our lives and liberties. Whereas if you see in the West, like even if you see the right wing over there, they definitely like lean towards Christianity, and they have the entire religious kind of ideology and expression to preserve as well. But at the same time, like they don't let that get in the way of fundamental things that matter. I feel like even if you study the West, not just in terms of the entire conspiracy movement, but even the militias, like the Christian militias and right wing people, like they've always been into conspiracies, going back to the Waco bombing, and if you see like way back, that's where they've come from in terms of questioning government and always being skeptical of government, which I think is a product of their libertarian foundations and the constitution and all of that. So I feel like even with the drugs issue, people just need to get a lot more nuanced and informed about the effects of banning these substances and the detrimental impact they have. Like it achieves the exact opposite of the people who like support these policies. You know, they want a certain thing, but because they don't understand economics or they don't understand just like human behavior, it totally lands up bringing them the result that they're opposed to. So people need to think much deeper, and that's only possible when we do more work and we grow a counterculture that supports that. So, and I mean, I find it really sad to see that we are at the forefront of doing this. Typically, I would want that as you know, youngsters who are growing up, we had people who we follow, who are our mentors, who are doing this for a long time. But I don't find anyone like that to look up to or work with. Like I had to pioneer so much shit by myself and just pushed through totally uncharted territory which no one has really tread on in this country. So it's of course been a enlightening experience where I've got to learn a lot along the way. But yeah, from the, I mean, you can imagine it in such a sense that since we're starting now, and like we of course gonna keep doing this, at least I know for sure, like I am throughout my life, it's my life's purpose to do this work and to really get more people on our side and to change things in a fundamental way. It will take a couple of decades for sure before we get to a place that the West is at. So we are kind of following in the footsteps of the West, and we can, because I've studied them so much and I've seen the movement grow and analyze the factors that have helped them to get where they are. Like all of that wisdom and experience can be, it should be factored in when we're trying to do our work out here, and that's what I've always tried to do, which is why I've been able to get to where I'm at. To be honest, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when it comes to drugs, when it comes to marijuana or any other drugs, I see very few people making sense. There are a few people like Vicky Varora or a bunch of other activists, but most Indians are so immature when it comes to drugs. Even when it came to that whole witch hunt of Bollywood celebrities a couple of years ago, but there was this one thing. I know you're involved with this recent Citizens Court of India thing, and I was watching a few of the footage with regards to the SSR case. I don't watch a lot of Hindi movies. Prior to SSR's death, I had not even heard his name that many times. I don't know much about this. So, can you tell me what is surrounding his death?
For sure, man. Like from the amount that I've looked into it, so I'm not like a, you can say a new entrant to researching this, because right when it had happened itself, I had been on a couple of big YouTube channels who were talking about this, and I put my knowledge about international pedophile rings and Satanism and all of that to infuse that into the conversation out here, to show them that like this stuff doesn't just, it's not limited to our country and certain Bollywood people and all of that being involved, but it expands much larger throughout the world, with all of these international scandals and the evidence of that coming out. So if you just look into this, right, like you'll find a lot of evidence to basically like convince yourself that he was indeed murdered, and it seems to be a case where there was an element of child trafficking involved. So you have to kind of go through the evidence that's presented over there. So our lawyers did a lot of work over 1-2 months. They basically have been collecting a lot of evidence. I helped them out with some of it. There have been other people who were helping them out with evidence as well. The one thing I found the most convincing is the fact that Sushant was maintaining a diary. Like he would write in there over there, basically like whatever he's learning about, and he has started his research into figuring these things out just like we did. So in his diaries, like he basically exposed everything he knew about Bollywood and the murders that have happened, like Sri Devi's murder, Divya Bharati's murder. Like he's written extensively about that. He's also mentioned in his diary about the threats he's got from people like Aditya Thackeray and others in the industry who were threatening him to stop researching the kind of things he was looking into. Otherwise, like he would have consequences for his life. And in his diaries also, funnily enough, like the part which like changed my mind a lot is that he was talking about COVID and the New World Order and Bill Gates and all of that. Like, even that is there. He's also talking about Aadhaar being a surveillance tool in order to really in order for the government to control people and the deep state to control people. So Sushant was clearly like quite tapped in, and if you just see the evidence of the diaries itself, like you have to follow this person called Deepti Pinnati. We had her on for like an interview on the second day with our lawyer, and she's the person who basically was investigating Sridevi's murder in the past. She'd filed cases in the High Court and Supreme Court as well about that, and she eventually started looking into the Sushant case, and she said she had some contacts in Bollywood and a team that she'd built. So they landed up intercepting his hard drive where he was maintaining like encrypted notes of everything that he was going through, and then they landed up decoding the drives and putting that information out. So she has like 50 or 60 episodes where she's like part by part gone through everything that Sushant was writing over there, and a lot of the things that he's mentioned can be cross corroborated. Like if he's writing about something, then you can find supporting media articles and stuff around that time to confirm what he's writing about. So that's one thing. I knew another person in this case as well, whose boyfriend was actually training with Tiger Shroff, and she personally like made me hear certain things which were convincing to me that he was murdered. Like uh, this chick basically got a call from her boyfriend at 9 o'clock in the morning, wherein he was telling her that they killed Sushant and stuff. And later on in the day, when she called him again, he basically flipped his story, and she spotted him like going out together in the car with Tiger Shroff's mom, I think she said. And then he's totally flipped the story, and he was like, "No, they did. Like, it was a suicide, and what are you talking about?" kind of thing. And she made me hear the voice note where she confronted her boyfriend later, and he basically kind of accepted that he called her in the morning and told her that. So yeah, I mean, like I've come across different things when I've looked into the evidence, which convinced me that it was a murder. And his manager, like his ex-manager Disha Salian, she had actually encountered this entire child sex trafficking side of Bollywood, where she'd seen young kids being abused by some people who are part of the industry, and they killed her first, and then they landed up killing Sushant in the sequence, because Sushant apparently was planning to come out and expose whatever Disha had figured out before she died. So yeah, it's a big mess, to be honest. And like if you research a lot of Hollywood celebrities as well and what's happened to them when they've tried to expose pedophilia and things like that, it's kind of a similar blueprint that went on in this case. And I just wonder like the kind of impact Sushant could have made if he was alive and he actually like went on with these things, and it would have got so much traction, especially with him talking about the vaccines and the new world order and COVID and Bill Gates and all of that. Like that would, I mean, like, it's kind of frustrating. Like the few people who I look at and think, fuck, if this guy was alive, he could have made such a big impact. Like they'll end up being killed somehow. Even Rajiv Dixit or even Sushant for that matter. So yeah, that's just a summary. Like there's a lot to dig into over there. There's hours of content you can watch. I can give recommendations for people who I find credible. The problem I had with this entire space in the beginning is that it just seemed to be surrounded by a lot of right wing like BJP people who were using that as fuel to bash Congress in some way and bash the Thakres and all. So I was put off in the beginning because there were some people who made really outlandish, egregious claims as well. Like, the kind of quacky side of like Indian people who are looking into this. So if you see the West, like, people come up with these really absurd theories that, oh, this guy's actually alive, even when he's dead, and like without any evidence whatsoever. So there's this one guy, I think Vibhor Anand, he claims like he's a lawyer, and he gained a lot of traction in the entire Sushant movement, and I was following him for a long time. And then eventually, like, he just went off the rails. He started saying shit like Sushant is alive and he's going to come, like, anytime soon and give the evidence that he's alive. And it's the same kind of thing with all of these wacky, like, paranoid schizo kind of people. They keep saying it's going to happen, and then it never really happens, and then they change the date or they change the story or something. So because of people like that, I did get a bit put off. But then when I found like this is one channel called Candid Meena, and then this chick I mentioned, Deepthi Pinnati, like I found them to be quite credible because they didn't seem to be pushing this narrative that's supporting the BJP and stuff. They were just interested in revealing like whatever had been put out, and even going against the BJP if like the evidence was there, which there is. I mean, if you research Sushant's drives, like he's gone after many BJP ministers and all as well. So yeah, I think that's a decent summary, and people can look into these sources if they want to dig into it more. And even the entire Citizens Court thing, like the videos that were collected by lawyers that were shown over there are very convincing itself, because Like there are statements from ex-ministers and MLAs who are talking about the children and the Thakres and everything quite openly. And even surrounding the murder, there's a lot of evidence around the timing and like the photographic evidence and all of that. So you really have to dig into it to kind of make your mind up either way. But I'm pretty much convinced, looking at all of this, that it was a hit for sure.
That's crazy, dude. Because up until this conversation, I was like convinced that it was just a suicide and all these so-called SSR warriors are a bunch of retards. I'm sure many of them are.
Many of them are.
Because
That's the thing. Like many of them are, but then you have to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's the mistake a lot of people make that I've seen. Yeah.
the reason why I think a lot of laymen like myself, a lot of rational thinkers like myself are put off by this SSR case is because of the behavior of these so-called SSR warriors. But then we
Hmm.
have to be more nuanced and we have to attempt to find the truth. And I'm
See,
really
out
glad.
here you're not gonna get the intellectual rigor that you're expecting. So you really have to just go into things and look for the evidence without getting too consumed by people's narratives, or if something about their mindset or their view on different issues puts you off. Like you have to try and put all of that aside as a good researcher and just look at what the evidence is trying to tell you. Because I mean, like, you can see it myself, right? With my example, I mean, if I just threw it out because of the kind of factors that I mentioned, then I wouldn't really be able to, like, I would be dismissing the truth in some sense. If I just use my knee jerk reactions and being like annoyed and like really put off by these people, then I wouldn't really pursue it and get to the kind of stuff that I figured out later on. So I feel like, yeah, the discernment thing is so crucial, man. Like, and especially like being born where we are in this kind of culture and landscape, like it makes it all the more harder. But then like it rewards you with the gold truth in the end if you just keep going at it and keep pursuing it.
Yeah. To add on to that SSR case, I think this is the first time I heard the names of Thakres involved. Usually in the past, I've only heard of two big names. One is Karan Johar, and one is his girlfriend Riya Chakraborty. Do you think they are in some way connected to his murder?
Yeah, so the Ria, around like Sushant's death, I think like Ria and Aditya Thackeray had 40 or 45 phone calls from their call logs, and she landed up leaving him like right before he died. So the timing and everything of that is quite suspicious. There are some theories that Ria was like planted into his life to drug him in some way and to spoil his mental landscape. I still have more research to do about that to make my mind up either way. But just considering the circumstances around the timing of the calls and her leaving him, like she did have some role to play in that. Not directly in terms of killing him, but in this indirect kind of way, playing a role in his life, which made it easier for him to get killed. I feel like that's my conclusion, like looking into stuff so
Okay.
far.
And what about Karan Johar?
Karan Johar's name I've never heard, dude. Like the
Yeah.
main people who come up are like Salman Khan, Suraj Pancholi, Thackeray. Like I've never really heard Karan's name so far. So I don't know where you're getting that from, bro.
No, his name was demonized a lot as soon as this guy was murdered. They were saying that he only promotes these child actors. He tried to
Oh,
sideline.
the entire thing about nepotism.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So
Yeah, but that wasn't. I don't think that was directly related to the murder. That was just like a cultural commentary on the state of Bollywood and the
okay.
kind of
Yeah.
like behaviors that are followed in terms of just promoting their own people and their own
No,
families and things like that.
actually, when he just passed away, a lot of Karan Johar's posts were filled with the comments like "You killed SSR, justice for SSR."
Oh,
So
okay,
that's the reason why I brought up his name. Maybe he has nothing to do with it.
got it.
Yeah, but that's the reason why I brought up his name. So speaking of quackery and there is some progress. Okay, I'm especially proud of Awaken India movement because last time when I came to that event in 2020, in the beginning of last year, there were a bunch of quacks. I'm not going to name them, but there were a lot of quacks. But now I see you getting people like Dr. Aseem Malhotra, Dr. Peter McCullough. I see Anmol Ambani and Krisha involved in this as well. So when I see all of this, it makes me feel like okay, there is a lot of hope with the Awaken India movement.
For sure, man. I feel like it's been such a great journey over the years in terms of just doing our work and helping to build a more credible movement that can put out information which is not quacky, so to speak, but is like on point with the science of things. At the same time, we're trying to appeal to people in a way that will also get them emotionally and like in terms of their passion or wanting to fight for freedom and truth and all of that. So I'm very happy personally with the trends of last year. As I said, like just becoming friends with Aseem as well, and getting him down and doing the whole circuit that we did in Delhi and Mumbai. That was something that was really encouraging to see in terms of like people like that from abroad being willing to come here and help us out. Like it's because of Aseem that we ended up getting some traction in the media also, where he was instrumental in pushing certain information out that helped to get like a lot of eyes on the issue of Covishield and how it's worse than like the mRNA vaccine as well in a lot of cases. So it was really great doing that, and then kudos to Ashutosh also for getting McCullough out here. It was a little disappointing because in the Delhi event, there's this one quack who just like stood up and like, said some random shit when McCullough was talking, but then that is kind of par for the course when you're doing events like that in India, especially in Delhi, I guess. But other than that, it was a pretty smooth experience. They had a great time. Like Dr. McCullough was very inspired and impressed by whatever like has been going on with me and Serum and the entire other saga and all of that. So that was good to see. Like even these people are really interested in what's going on out here in terms of the legal action. Because to be honest, like a lot of pioneering legal work surrounding the entire pandemic has been done in our country in terms of reversing the mandates or in terms of directly head on taking on the biggest vaccine manufacturers of the world. So we do have stuff to be proud about. Like as much as there is stuff to complain about, I feel like in the last 2 years we've done a lot. Plus having the kind of friends and people I've got to know in the movement who really got involved and put the energies in, like Anmol Krisha, of course, like one amazing fire couple who put the energies into this and really like done their bit in terms of getting the information out at the risk of everything that happens when you're born in that kind of family and then pursuing the truth. So really, really proud of them and of so many other people who've helped us to take and scale a Awaken India movement to where it is to be today, to be honest. And yeah, I guess that we just have to keep doing this over and over again. Like repetition is the biggest form of mind control. So we just need like to get more people involved, more credible doctors, more lawyers, more media people, and I feel like because things are a little bit calm right now in terms of how much assault we're facing on our freedoms. Like people are much more laid back, which is just natural. I mean that's what happens. Like because I have experience before the pandemic being involved, where it was just like me and five of my friends who knew about this stuff, and looking at things back then, you can make sense of how things are right now because whenever there's like this calm and things are progressing very slowly, like people just get on with their lives and get busy like trying to build their careers or their personal lives and all of that. But the minute like the next assault comes, like we should know for sure that there will be way more people than there were in the COVID time as well, which is what I look forward to. It makes me sound like a little bit of a psychopath and narcissist in some sense. Like Yohan wants suffering to come so more people like get involved, but that's how things are, to be honest. Like people don't change unless they get like bad shocks in their life, or whether on a societal scale or on an individual scale. I feel like suffering is the catalyst that really moves people to get on the right side. Of course that suffering can be misused to go down deeper into dissent and chaos in people's personal lives, but then a lot of people do make the right choice and start becoming aware and questioning things and fighting tyranny and all of that. So yeah, things are just gonna keep getting better from here. It'll get worse in terms of how much society is gonna degrade and the amount of rights and economic liberty and everything we're going to lose. But at the same time, our numbers are gonna keep growing, and hopefully, in that whole pendulum, eventually, in the long run, things will look good because there will be some kind of societal collapse for sure, and like famines, wars, food shortages, and lockdowns, and climate tyranny, and we're gonna face a lot of shit in the next couple of years for sure. But yeah, at the same time, like that's gonna be the catalyst to grow our movement even more, and I look forward to the fighting the entire climate issue. I feel like that's really gonna like be in our face. It's already happening. Like I was in Delhi recently, and I saw like huge billboards about net zero and Modi really promoting the sustainable development goals, and with the entire like G20, everyone had come down, and even the entire like fight for banning cryptocurrencies. I feel like that's another frontier that these people are really going to go hard on in the next couple of years to ban like Bitcoin and things like that, and really promote CBDCs. So like the entire monetary enslavement side of things and the climate front, I feel like we are going to have to do much more work on that, and like a lot of people are going to come into our movement when they start experiencing that, oh, I can't like exercise my monetary freedom because my CBDC isn't allowing me to spend out here, or like my carbon allowance doesn't let me do whatever like I was doing earlier. So that's going to be the motivation for new recruits into our conspiracy crowd. So yeah, those are the kind of trends
Yeah,
I see playing out over the next
yeah.
couple of years.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too, to see how people will react to these new changes. And like I mentioned, you have collaborated with some really good doctors like Peter McCullough, Aseem Malhotra, but there are also some intelligent doctors on the other side. A very interesting doctor, a hepatologist to be more
Liver
precise.
doc. Yeah, I knew you'd bring it up for sure.
Liver. I
Yeah.
had to bring this up. Okay, because he's such an interesting guy. I should add that he's quite intelligent, and I like a lot of the things that he says. I'm sure you do too. And I find a lot of his things educational. Like when he says things like even a little bit of alcohol is bad for the liver, I agree with him. A lot of the things that he says actually make complete sense. But then when I saw him react to you, it was so fucking immature for a doctor of his intellect. Okay, for like a grown ass man. Okay, because all you did, you were really polite. I saw that. I read that entire thread. Like I wanted to, like, the first thing that I saw was his insults. Okay, then I was like, okay, what did Johan do to provoke him so much? Let me read the original thread. Then I went through your entire thread. You were so polite. You all you did was like put clinical studies. You put meta-analysis. You used his own logic against him. You were talking like, like Pranav Radhakrishnan from Sciences Dope. You were being very rational because I think you knew how he would react, and
I
you
didn't want to leave him any scope. That's
yeah.
the reason the thread was like that. I was like, I don't want to leave him any kind of give him any opportunity where he could just like come onto the thread and say, oh, you engaged in this logical fallacy or whatever, blah blah blah. I didn't want to bring in any of my conspiracy stuff into it. I was just like, dude, like this is what I do for a living, man. I'm constantly sitting and researching the medical literature to help improve I Thrive and the kind of treatments we offer to people. Like this is what I do, man, for a living. This is where I get my salary from. So it does come up as an attack on people who are actually trying to pursue credible science-based medicine, but from like a bent where we only want natural things to be used, whether it's herbs or vitamins or minerals or like just three words, but then those categories encompass so many compounds within them that play such crucial roles in the body in terms of our biochemistry and like nutrition is pretty much everything. Like it does sound egregious to say that, but then all diseases take place when we have imbalances in our biochemistry, which have to do with all of these different vitamins and minerals. So if you just figure out how to get that on track and figure out like, okay, what other natural compounds can help us to move our health in the right direction, then you don't necessarily have to depend on allopathy. So what we're trying to pioneer with functional medicine is exactly a way where we can really have a good handle on what's happening inside someone. So I spent a lot of time really researching the diagnostic side of things. Like that's my expertise. So gut microbiome testing, genetic testing, organic acids, hormones, blood work, like just integrating all of that and really cracking some like why someone's going through what they're going through. And then the other end of the research is basically just coming up with evidence-based solutions, like digging deep into the medical literature. And you'll be surprised, man. Like the common notion about the scientific literature is, oh, it's just mainly filled with studies about pharmaceutical drugs, but that's far from the truth. Like if you genuinely take a good look at the scientific literature, a fuck ton of studies are there, and you'll find repositories of websites which are dedicated to just archiving studies about natural compounds. There's like a crazy ton of evidence that I myself like get flabbergasted looking at every time. Like fuck, I have so much to learn and so much to dig into. So
So
since I'm so steeped in that space, like him coming out and whenever he says some whack shit on Twitter, that I'm like day in day out either giving it to people, biohacking it on myself, or things like that. Then I know, and he has a very big following, so I just like itch to like control that, and I have to let it out somewhere. So I thought I'll do it in a way where like people watching it can also see that this guy is such a buffoon.
Yeah.
Like all he had to do was either tell me the reasoning behind why my studies are wrong, or maybe post higher studies from his end. Like maybe there were better
Or
studies which
you
factored
know,
in, like what, yeah, something like that.
the best I was expecting him to ignore you. I think that, like, from his perspective, the best thing that he could have done is say, okay, I think I might have made a mistake, I'm just going to ignore him. But this jackass went went
He
ahead,
doubled
and
down.
he
That is his
he
like mistake.
doubled
Yeah.
down, and it was so stupid, calling Asim Malhotra an anti-science Nazi and calling Malone an idiot. See, like, I hear from people from his side asking the layman like myself to trust the experts, to follow the science, and that's what we try to do. We take their advice and follow scientists like Asim Malhotra, like Robert Malone. But now he's like, no, he's a Nazi. Why? Because he's on the other side. And then at the very end, his own supporters, his own followers were pointing out to him, look, this is what Yohan did. All he did was point evidence, and you are attacking him personally. That doesn't make sense. To which he made this absurd, this is over intellectualizing things. He said, well, I don't want to disprove him because of Dunning-Kruger effect. Well, if you are so if you're so concerned about Dunning-Kruger effect, if you're so concerned that Johan will get more attention, then you could have just avoided him.
But he
So
already gave me more attention by just addressing
exactly,
me, right? I was what
exactly, what a
like.
moron.
No, but that was a lot of fun to do. I just wanted to see if he would. The thing with these kind of people, I'll tell you what their problem is. They kind of assume the monopoly on like science when it comes to health, especially like all these people with big letters after their name who spent years in like training in some kind of branch of allopathic medicine, whether it's to become a liver expert or like a neurosurgeon or whatever. And they come with this typical like Shermer Randy kind of militant mindset when it comes to like preserving this narrative that allopathy and pharmaceuticals are the only evidence-based way to treat diseases, and anything that is under that is all quackery. So Ayurveda and homeopathy, like he will say, outright quackery. And then when it comes to functional medicine, the narrative is that, oh, it's a little bit more sophisticated form of quackery, but it's still quackery. That's the kind of position they want to maintain. Even if you see, like, go do Google search on functional medicine, you'll find these like Rational Wiki and all these like militant atheist kind of blogs, science-based medicine, and like I'm no stranger to all of this because I've been looking into these kind of people and their mindsets. Like on my podcast, also I recently had this guy Alex Sikaris, so I really recommend you to watch his podcast because in his entire career, like he's basically interviewed a lot of people in the frontier science areas, and then he also has a dialogue with the skeptics. So he's had exchanges with Shermer and not Randy, but he's had exchanges with Christopher French as well, and a lot of the so-called like prominent skeptics in the West. So it's mainly going through his work and then seeing the back and forth between the skeptics and the people who are trying to push the boundaries of science in areas that might seem woo or might seem like going into non-material realms, but at the same time have a like good large amount of credible evidence supporting like non-material phenomena. If you just see the entire exchanges that have taken place and the articles on his website and all, it really helps to expose the mindset of these skeptics and the way they tend to behave. I've seen it a lot of times because the skeptics have a lot of things to say about conspiracies and about like psychics and mediums and non-human phenomena and aliens and all of that. So I find them like it's like a group of people that's dedicated to defending the mainstream narrative on everything. Like it's pretty much, if I analyze them over the years, it comes down to that, and they have a common tactic of using the logical fallacies that they themselves rail against. Like if you listen to the arguments a lot, like what is a skeptic supposed to do, right? Like the first thing they know is that ad hominem attacks are not an argument. And this guy like just goes off on a crazy ad hominem spree, not addressing my evidence at all, not like the way to address it is, okay, this guy has come up, and a proper skeptic knows that a background doesn't matter. Like a 3-year-old child could say, like, point to a study and that could be true. Like whoever the fuck that guy is or what his background is has nothing to do with the argument he's presenting. This is a common talking point you'll see from the skeptics themselves, like about ad hominem attacks. But then when you see how they behave when they're challenged on their bullshit and their quackery, like it's exactly the same thing.
I
You
mean,
know, so
he
the
yeah, he broke so many logical fallacies: ad hominem, appeal to authority, appeal to popularity, and like every logical fallacy that he and his gang talks about, he contradicted that easily.
and
So
I really don't even get the thing, man. Like I put a picture from I actually stalked his Twitter quite a bit. So I was
hmm,
trying to find a place where he would declare, okay, what is the kind of evidence that he would expect
hmm,
in order to change his mind on something.
yeah,
And then it basically like came down to a picture which I posted in the thread itself, where he said that okay, we need at least like RCTs, you know, like human clinical trials or meta-analysis in order to start thinking that okay, something does have evidence. And that's exactly what I posted. Like I had more like mechanistic studies and animal trials and all of that to post, but I intentionally didn't post any of that. I was like, dude, this is what you said, this is what you want,
yeah.
I'm giving you that. Now fucking change your mind. You know, like act like a good scientist and change your mind when you're confronted with shit that you've not researched enough. And you know, you'll end up making a fool of yourself and someone points that out to you, but oh, he doesn't happen to be a scientist or someone with 4 letters after the name. So you can just dismiss him and your dumb Indian followers will just go along with you because like your followers don't know how to think either, right? That's the sad state of things where they are right now. If this same dialogue was happening in the West, like just looking at the exchange and the thread, I would have gained so many followers from his side. But because people out here just don't know how to think, man, it's a very like sad state of affairs. But that's sadly where things are, and it's up to us to change that and move it in the right direction.
Okay. Uh, Moving on, like I want to talk a little bit about food cults. We are seeing, we've already spoken about in the past. We might have spoken about vegans, and on one side we have the carnivores, and there are different food cults. There are people who promote ketogenic diet. I don't know what kind of diet you follow, but when I see people like Paul Saladino, it confuses me a little because he went to Africa. He saw one tribe eat meat and honey, and then he promotes that kind of diet. But then there are people in the blue zones, in places like Okinawa, in places like the Mediterranean, even in his country, like where he's staying in Costa Rica. Even in Costa Rica, there's a place called Nicoya, which is a blue zone where there are a lot of centenarians, and they eat a lot of carbs. They eat corn, they eat tomatoes, they eat sweet potatoes, and their diets are very diverse, and yet they have very low rates of chronic illnesses. So should we be very skeptical of these food cultists?
Basically, when we're talking about diets, like I've had a lot of experience with different kinds of diets myself because I started my conscious awakening journey. A lot of it was inspired by wanting to take control of my health. Like when I was getting into this shit back in college in 2015, I'd seen a lot of vegan documentaries like Cowspiracy and Earthlings, and like What the Hell wasn't out then. It came many years later, like Game Changers and all our recent documentaries. But at that time, like whatever documentaries I could see, I had seen, and I had pretty much like become a hardcore vegan. Even like the way I am arguing about things now, I would argue about veganism in that favor like back in college. So I guess like experiences like that actually taught me to, you know, not let my beliefs and my ideas get attached to my personality. Because had I done that with veganism, like I would have constantly like held on to that, despite me being convinced that it's not the ideal thing to believe in. So I always that's how I kind of learned since the beginning to be able to go where the evidence is and not try to attach myself, even if it comes at the expense of being wrong and having to change my mind, because that's what real skepticism and truth seeking is all about. You keep changing your mind as you go along. The reason I mentioned that is because I've done the same process for pretty much like every single diet that I've gone through and come to a radically different conclusion right now. So my journey, like after veganism, basically I got hardcore into ketogenic diets, and like there was a time where I did a ketogenic diet for 1.5 years straight. I'm not even exaggerating, but I was in continuous ketosis for like 1.5 years non-stop. And that time I didn't have a YouTube channel or anything. Like I was just geeking out by myself, reading books and applying all this shit and trying to like biohack and make my health symptoms go away, because I had many health symptoms I was struggling with. and the keto diet made some of like my skin issues worse, and my fatigue and everything also like didn't improve. But I had certain benefits in terms of my mental performance and like my cognition, like how fast I was able to think and process things. And so there were like benefits as well as things got worse. So that clearly went on for a long time, and I was a big follower of Dr. McCullough, so I would like watch his podcast, try to get one episode in every day, and just like absorb as much health information as I could in order to crack my own issues and help other people around me who are going through different kinds of symptoms. After doing that, then I kind of got into cyclical ketosis. This is when even Mercola started changing his narrative that continuous ketosis is not ideal and we should be cycling because that's what our ancestors did. So I started cycling carbs in and out, and that was a little bit better than being in ketosis. After that, I got into the entire carnivore movement. So then I did like a proper carnivore diet because Saladino had just like come on the scene that time, and I think Saladino came on a little later. I first one I saw was of McCullough on Joe Rogan's podcast. That's what really got me into the carnivore diet at that time. I tried it, and still like my skin symptoms and all didn't get any better. Like I had benefits in terms of energy and brain performance and all of that, but like the main thing I was struggling with, which is basically like really bad skin issues, seborrheic dermatitis, extreme dandruff, fatigue, like so sleep for like 14-15 hours will feel like I haven't slept. I had severe gallbladder issues. Both the ketogenic diet and carnivore diet made that worse because I'd have to constantly like gobble down a lot of fat. So I've been through some crazy fucking experiments in the entire like this process of trying to figure out what's the best diet for me and what's the best way of eating for me. And in that, I've landed up decimating my health a lot more than sometimes, and like finding my way back to baseline after going down some wrong rabbit hole and screwing my health up. So I've done a lot of that, and over time, like I've reached the conclusion now that health is very bad individual, and you have to really get to the bottom of things for a person and test the fuck out of them if you really want to figure out what's going on. So like my enlightenment in this space came when I exhausted all my dietary options. I've tried every diet under the sun, tried the basic supplements on the blog. Like I've taken the zinc, I've taken the omega, like taken the krill oil and the basic B complex and all of that. And 20-30% improvement you can say, but nowhere near where I wanted to be. So I clearly knew that I'm struggling with shit that is much more complex, and to figure that out I'm going to have to invest properly in diagnostics and to learn like what's really going on. So I took a lot of time out, many months I've spent just like studying the gut microbiome and how to assess that. And there's each of these tests has so many different markers, and it's really complex stuff. Like you have to properly geek out and become like a nerd scientist for a long time to be able to wrap your head around these things. And that's what I did for like good 2.5 years. I just invested my brain power along with everything else that's going on into like figuring this shit out as well. And I landed up getting good answers because I landed up studying genetics. Like functional genetics actually is a different branch of genetics where we analyze single nucleotide polymorphisms like mutations in different genes, and then we try to figure out, okay, this area of your body is a little bit weaker. Like maybe you have some genetic issues in making glutathione, which is your body's master antioxidant. So now to counteract that, your glutathione requirements are more than other people. Or maybe you have some genetics in your methylation cycle, so you need more folate or you need more B12 or something like that. So that's how I learned genetics, is to basically analyze where our issues are from birth, and then try to mitigate that or balance that with supplementation and lifestyle and diet and all of that. So putting all of that together, that is when my health enlightenment came, because I was able to, like, currently I don't have any of the symptoms that I used to struggle with. I used to have really bad, horrible cystic acne everywhere, like on my face and my body. I would have like very bad seborrheic dermatitis, so like my face would constantly be red and scaling. Same thing with my scalp and everything else I mentioned as well. I had tonsillitis also. So I was struggling with like 4 or 5 really top-notch bad symptoms, which everyone could see and which made my quality of life like really bad. And now like I've conquered all of it. I don't even have a single symptom every day, and it's because like that's my tagline. But I take 40 supplements a day. So like I've been trying to just educate people online about supplementation, and I see a lot of patients as well personally now, because a lot of people have started running advanced tests. So I basically like I'm the guy who interprets it and tells them like how to go about it, because I have my own experience and I'm gaining more and more patient experience the more people I'm dealing with, which is what really pisses me off about people like Liverdoc. You know, like I'm fucking seeing patients, I'm seeing their labs, I'm giving them shit, I'm moving their markers in the right direction. It's all evidence based. There's no guesswork. Like, you know, even it's not even like just the symptoms are improving, but even the markers are moving in the right direction and we're getting them into range and everything. So when you work on people like that and you see such profound transformations in such chronic health diseases and really nasty skin conditions and GI disorders and mental health disorders and thyroid disorders and so much, like that's what convinces me, like, okay, I've put in so much time into studying this and I can put it into practice now with myself and with other people and see radical transformations in people's health, which is just not possible with diets. Like, so mainly like in the health space, I've stopped following people who are diet evangelists, and my list of people who I follow is pure functional medicine people who are not attached to any diet, but basically just like depend on diagnostics to figure out what's the right thing for any given person. So Chris Masterjohn is like my biggest inspiration in the space. He's always kept me very evidence based and, you know, go where the science is and don't try to get like attached. And even he's like, he started as a vegan and then he experimented with all kinds of diets and he's trying to like biohack and figure his way out. So I've come across like many, I would say my health knowledge curve has grown so much where I'm just like, I'm following the kind of people who normal people wouldn't be able to consume, because my technical knowledge curve has grown so much. So I've like pretty much stopped following all these. I keep in touch with them. Like I do try to stay on top of like what everyone's up to in that space. But like just through my own evolution of knowledge and wanting to, you know, like fix my own issues and issues of others, my final conclusion is that health is bio individual and it's only when you test someone will you figure it out. Now of course everyone can't invest or won't have the will to invest so much in so much testing and supplements, but if you genuinely want to take control of your own health and not depend on hospitals or allopathy, this is like, I hate to sound like a zealot or something, but this is the only way, evidence based way I'm convinced of, that can help us to get there. Because we're trying to incorporate the best of everything. Like we're trying to incorporate the best of diagnostics, the best knowledge we have about everything natural to in the, you know, natural health space, to try and reverse everything. So we don't leave any approach out. Like whatever works is on the table. You know, if it's grounding or it's sunlight, like light modification and sleep and, you know, like supplement regimens and everything, like everything on the table, even in terms of diet. Like our diets are customized depending on someone's need. Like if someone comes to us and they're insulin resistant or the type 1 diabetic, then they'll of course have to do a diet which has a low glucose load. Now contrast that to someone who has like an autoimmune disorder, maybe they don't need to be that hard on like cutting their carbs down, but they need to focus on removing like autoimmune triggering foods, you know. So it's kind of like different for everyone depending on the condition they're going through. That being said, there's of course like uh, a right diet that's the best for most people, and that's an animal based diet. Like it's like a mix of both animal foods and plant foods. The thing I don't like about the carnivore movement is that they try to use their short term success and extrapolate it in a way where they think that that's going to work for life, which is like really really short sighted. The reason the carnivore diet works in the short run is because you're removing certain triggering foods that like stop triggering you, because your gut lining in your GI is so damaged. Once you heal that, and once you like seal your gut lining and repair whatever imbalances have been going on for your body for a long time, you become more resilient to foods. I've seen it myself. Like I used to react so much to coconut oil and dairy earlier, and I would get like bad breakouts and like really bad seborrheic dermatitis flare ups. And the like when I made my body more resilient and I fixed my omega-3 index and I see like, you know, heal my gut and like so much, I can eat the same food now and have like 20% of the reaction I used to have earlier. So clearly it's just like, you know, their whole focus is on the food, but then our focus is more holistically. We consider the food, but then you also have to consider all the body's defenses and resiliency in being able to improve the body's host defenses so that we become more resilient to food, and our food palette is wider, which puts us at less risk of having nutrient deficiency. Because whenever you cut like large food groups out, you automatically like predispose yourself to developing some nutrient deficiency. And then it's just like veganism, you know, like a vegan might cut out animal foods altogether, and they won't see the effect like right in a month or so. They'll be like, fine, I'm thriving on plant foods and I'm feeling lighter, and my body doesn't show me that I need some B12 or anything, but the damage takes long time to happen. So similarly, when you cut out plant foods, you put yourself at a risk of having like a vitamin C deficiency or a manganese deficiency, a molybdenum deficiency. Like there's nutrients you get in plants that you don't get in animals, and vice versa. So that's why I don't like this zealous kind of approach. And that being said, like plants have anti-nutrients, and there's a right way to prepare them and cook them and all of that. So it's like both sides have truth in them. I feel like the animal based side, of course, has a lot more truth than the plant based side. Like that's for certain. Like if you were to ask me what's better to do, a vegan diet or a carnivore diet, I'd any day choose a carnivore diet. That's like that goes without saying. But having said that, we are ultimately interested in finding the truth and not getting stuck in a diet echo chamber, right? Like that's what our ultimate goal should be. So why should we have to accept like this whole carnivore package when we can go much further than that and even improve that so much? Like I've seen a lot of personal like evidence of this as well with the doctors I've studied from, who've worked with carnivore clients, and they have issues with like different things like gut health or the vitamin C status, or like like so many nutrients associated with plant foods that are not so easily available in animal foods. So that's the conclusion I've reached overall, more or less, that like both plant and animal foods are important, and sometimes animal foods can be harmful. Like let's say you have a male who has iron overload and he has some genetic disorder which makes him have hemochromatosis. Hemochromatosis is a medical condition where like your ferritin levels build up a lot. So in that kind of condition, if you're gonna give this dude red meat and like have a carnivore diet, he's gonna get worse. Like he's gonna get that excess iron is gonna create hydroxyl free radicals, and it's basically gonna go around wreaking havoc in his cells and damaging different parts of the cells. That's what iron does in high amounts. Like it creates this free radical called hydroxyl, and then that goes and creates havoc inside. So everything is like, the more I've studied this and the more in depth I've gone into this, it's all very very individualistic and case specific. And when you have someone's labs, you don't have to do any guesswork. You can. This is why like I see like so many patients, and like if you see my protocol for one person, it's radically different from what I give right to the next person who comes in to work with me. So that's
Okay.
the power of advanced diagnostics. You really eliminate the guesswork, and you can figure out what's exactly needed for the person you're working with, because every single person is radically different. Like that's what I've learned. Like that's my biggest takeaway so far. We tend to think that more or less people are the same, but that's the furthest from the truth that you could come to, because everyone's genetics can make them different in a million ways. Like you have a million different variables that could make you different from the person right next to you. So if there's so many variables that could make us different, whether it comes to our nutrient status or our genetics or our gut microbiome, or like so many things, that even within the nutrient section you have so many different types, and you could have different levels of each that make you different from another person. Given all of that, it's just like I don't know, it's very reductionist to say that one diet could work for everyone, considering that everyone's so radically different from inside.
Okay, got it. So I think one of the places where I disagree with you, or where I'm a bit more skeptical of you, is anarcho-capitalism, because I think it has a lot of unintended consequences when you talk about a world without government, or when you talk about private police, private militias. I can think of so many unintended consequences. Do you ever think about the unintended consequences of anarcho-capitalism?
I feel like there have been a lot of intellectuals whose work you can study who war gamed out the unintended consequences, and like tried to propose solutions for them. I would say, like the ideal way to think about this, in my opinion, would be that we're trying to deal with the problem from a first principles perspective. So basically, what do we want ultimately? We want a society where everything is voluntary and there is no coercion or force involved, right? So when we say that we want anarcho-capitalism, no one's forcing you into joining the anarcho-capitalist society. Like you can always choose to be a part of another part of the planet, whether the state, and you have a minimal government, right? So if you just like come to it from that perspective, it makes the ambiguity a lot less concerning with respect to how things will turn out. because we don't have a statist approach where we want the whole world to run anarcho-capitalists. We basically just want freedom for ourselves, and if someone wants to choose voluntary enslavement by choosing to be part of a government and paying their taxes for a minimal government, and they're like foolish enough and haven't learned from history that when you create a minimum government, it eventually grows into a hydra, and they still want to opt into that. Like, that's game,
But
man. Like, so
yeah, but that same logic can be used in a stateless society as well, right? Stateless societies eventually, a lot of them turn tyrannical, so that same logic can be used there as well, right?
it'd be. I don't think it's like factual to say that they have turned tyrannical, given that we genuinely haven't had the intellectual framework for creating a stateless society. This is why, like, the entire understanding of the ideas itself is very important. I feel like these ideas themselves have developed and matured over the last 100-150 years. So to say that we've like to point at ancient examples in the past where there was no cultural bedrock or like general people's understanding of these ideas, and then that morphed into statism. I don't think that's ever happened, because such a understanding of the ideas has never been present in the form of an intellectual school who's put all these giants, like academic giants, together and propose ways in which we could be dealing with these things. Now that we have that, we can properly try to incorporate a place wherein people are ideologically aligned, and we're trying to manifest their outcome in terms of having like private dispute resolution organizations and private firms that are offering the service of defense and all of that, and then see how it plays out. And then if it lands up morphing into a statist kind of tyranny, then we'll know for sure. But
Okay,
it's
so
never happened till now. Like, that's my point.
in a practical sense, like what I would want to see is for an anarcho-capitalist society to actually happen, because only then we will know. Like I'm not against anarcho-capitalism, I would want to see it happen, but if something goes wrong, then I would also want them to accept something went wrong. Because when I hear to people on the left side of on to left libertarians like Noam Chomsky, he says that anarcho-capitalism would self-destruct in 3 seconds or 3 minutes. So, like, I'm really concerned. Like, how does these things work? Like private police, for example. Like someone will bring up the concern that let's say I'm a very rich guy and I go and rape and murder the members of a poor family, and he calls the private police. But I have a wealthier, stronger private police. I'll ask my private police to arrest his private police and continue with this. So there are a lot of these concerns that I think should be addressed in order for us to continue this conversation on anarcho-capitalism. Because if we don't address these concerns, it will just be an ideology. But we have to take into account examples from reality as well, right?
See, so there's one thing in saying that the concerns haven't been addressed because they genuinely haven't been addressed, and there's another thing in saying that they haven't been addressed because we haven't yet explored the concerns being addressed. I think that the examples you gave at least fall into the second category, because I can point you to really in-depth resources and books and like very practical videos that lay out exactly the kind of example you mentioned. So you can, I'm not even making this up, go on YouTube, go to this channel called Man Against the State, and then he has like some basic animated videos that take you step by step through how the market for private defense would work. So he has like I mean, it's very like simple, short, crisp animated examples going exactly through this problem, going through the problem of, oh, okay, someone's wealthier and they have like a better police, how would a poor person defend themselves against that? So I don't think like the issues haven't been addressed, or that anarcho-capitalists are shying away from talking about things head on. I just feel like a lot of people don't actually want to invest their time and look into things. Like, if you explore Murray Rothbard's work or Walter Block's work, like, these people are meticulous. Even like the kind of examples they're citing are very surface level concerns that libertarians and ANCAPs have dealt with maybe like 2-3 decades ago. They like these kind of minds really war game out the worst scenarios, like the worst of the worst, and then come up with like practical solutions for them. So I would really explore people to check out like Murray Rothbard's work. Really changed my life. I think I read his book For a New Liberty, and he has like chapter on chapter going through like every single area of society that if we freed from the hands of the state, how would it really get better? And the same thing applies for, like, I mean, it's easy for people to think, okay, we'll just like privatize all the other areas, but then they can't seem to think about the military or the courts or the police. Like, this is where people's resistance really comes in, because we just can't imagine, given the way our society works now, like how those things would work. I feel like one of the easiest ways to think about this is to think that if you're actually opposed to anarcho-capitalism, then you should support a world government, because on a world stage we already have
But
like
but
anarchy, but it's just like we don't have a world government right now. We have nation states, and then above the nation states there's no controlling order, so you already have a version of anarchy that's manifesting right now, higher than nation states. So we just want to take that and bring that down to the level of the individual. Like, even people who talk about libertarianism and secession, like, being able to take the power back from the federal government and bring it to the local level, all we're saying is that we want it to come all the way to the individual. And these kind of arguments really go into the realm of utilitarianism, whereas where we are coming from is like a first principles thing. As I said, like, your body is yours, and whatever you mix with your body becomes your property. So if you want to justify like taking someone's property away, the burden of proof is on the person who's trying to take someone's legitimately derived self or property from them. And if you just operate from that first principles perspective, everything becomes voluntary, right? Like, because someone's, whatever money someone's earning is theirs, right? Like, as the rightful product of your labor. And then, since you are a sentient man who's earned it for himself, you should be able to decide where that goes. So why should I be forced to pay money for a police force that violates my individual rights and all of that? So I mean, let's try to think about it in this way, where we have multiple options. Like, you have some place in the world which is a minimum government and manages to stay a minimum government more or less, with like a politician like maybe Ron Paul or someone like that, or Robert Kennedy or whoever. I don't think Robert Kennedy will lean towards libertarianism given his like democratic leanings, but like, take your pick, any kind of libertarian party person who lands up running the political office of that country. Maybe we could have something like that, and maybe we could have one place where Walter Block and like all these people have started the ANCAP utopia, and then we can choose. Because, to be honest, like, we haven't seen any of these things play out. I mean, we don't even, the last time we had a minimum government was when America was created, and that lasted for a couple of decades until this is just how government works, man. Like, once you give them power to steal from you, then they want to steal more and more and more, and then take over all areas of our life. Which is why we find it so short-sighted to believe that, even despite trying this over and over, like starting a small government and then it morphs into something 100, 200 years later because of fiat currency and just the nature of authority in and of itself. Like, why can't we try for one time actually starting an ANCAP
no,
place, because we have the intellectual understanding to do that right now.
I'm all for it. I actually want to see an anarcho-capitalist society in few corners of the world, and to see what works. Some of them may succeed, some of them may fail, but at least we get to learn from that. So I'm for
Yeah.
the existence and the creation of ANCAP societies. I just can't wrap my head around how that will work, because even in the absence of government, there will still be governance, but it will be done in a more private way, and there is no guarantee that these private individuals will generally will are good people. Even if we private, like, I know that I'm citing too many of the worst examples, but I think we should, considering the way our world is. Even if you privatize all land, I can imagine more of these Jeffrey Epstein kind of islands popping out every here and there, using their private police to do the worst of the worst with children. So I can think of all these scenarios and say that, a stateless society is not necessarily the best, and we need to have sort of a more nuanced approach to government. Because when you look at something like atheism, I used to be a hardcore neo-atheist. I used to be like Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens a decade ago. But then I realized that there are unintended consequences of getting rid of government completely, getting rid of religion completely. When you get rid of Christianity and Judeo-Christian values in the West, you will see the rise of new religions like wokeism or right-wing
Hmm.
nationalism. So I just am like I think we should all be open to the concern that there will be unintended consequences of living in a stateless society.
have you seen any of the debates between ANCAPs and, like you mentioned, Noam Chomsky? So Noam Chomsky has a debate with Walter Block. You should really watch that. You should watch. I think Larkin Rose has done a debate with Jan Helfeld, who's a minimum government person who kind of echoes your sentiment. Just go through these debates, dude. Like, because all these things get fleshed out in great detail. Like, I would maybe we could do this. Like, you go and explore the stuff I'm telling you, and then have me on for a podcast, and then I can properly address the places that you still find are missing. That would add more value to like having a kind of conversation like that. Because even from just from the examples you mentioned, like there's a ton of resources that I've already explored that have gone like much further in terms of resolving these issues that you've probably not come across yet. So I would like encourage you to check those out, and maybe that will change your mind about some things. And as far as the understanding goes as to how to bring in anarcho-capitalism, I feel like once you understand that this is a moral position and it can only be derived not from like a top-down thing wherein we can vote in someone and then tomorrow suddenly they want to like bring in an Capistan or whatever. That's never going to happen because people don't know how society can function without government. So because they don't have the intellectual understanding to do that, so they'll naturally default to wanting a leader and have someone else take care of things for them, right? But it's only when a change in consciousness comes and people like start becoming moral and understanding that okay, it's wrong to steal from other people, so which is why like government is always going to be slavery. Like from that understanding, then you can have moral individuals who create that kind of society. Because if you're right, like if you happen to do that right now from a top down thing, that wouldn't last. Because it's the, I feel like what people underappreciate the most is the power of programming. If you just get a new fresh generation and you teach them all of these things, like the kind of society you will have will be way different, just for the fact that you taught them those things when they were small. I really feel like we take that for granted. It's the cultural and intellectual curriculum we impart into our children that really dictates the kind of society we'll have in the future. So if we do that and if we change people's minds, then overall like people will choose anarchy from a moral position, and then you'll automatically have good people, because if they weren't good they wouldn't change their mind and want to become moral in the first place, right? Like it just follows logically that that's what would happen. So if we tend to think that okay, like I think people, a lot of people have the wrong perception that this is something that can be forced on people, and it's a kind of political chain that can be foisted upon. I really don't think it's ever going to work like that. If ever like we have to move into that direction, it's going to be like one individual at a time, understanding this, changing their mind, and then wanting to focus their energies. At the same time, also I feel like anarcho-capitalism gets looked up as this magic solution to fix everything, and it's not. Okay, like you'll always have bad people, you'll always have free will, you'll always have psychopaths and narcissists. Like they're never going to go away, right? I mean, in a realistic sense, like some people are just born like that. I mean, from all the research I've done into occult matters and stuff, like there are large percentage of the people on the planet
Yeah.
are narcissists and psychopaths. So they're still
So
going to be there even if you create an anarcho-capitalist society, right? And you have to be able to deal with that. And the thing is that an ANCAP society would deal with them much better than a status society, because just with the market for defense, just with the right to bear arms, like we would have much more individual autonomy to deal with these people rather than depend on a centralized, defense force which we're all forced to fund and which can be taken over by these psychos ultimately. So
okay, okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll definitely look into all the podcasts that you have mentioned.
for sure.
What are your biggest concerns for the upcoming year, 2024? Is there going to be a World War III? Is the Russia-Ukraine war going to escalate?
I personally find like that whole situation has come to the brink many times, but it has never landed up escalating. At the same time, tensions are high, so there is a high chance that something like that might play out. So that definitely is a concern about like a nuclear conflict playing out between the major powers, and it's been that way for the last year and a half, ever since the Russia-Ukraine conflict started. So that's definitely on top of my list. Another thing would be about just the trend in which the finance side is changing a lot, because that is really the game changer, man. Like if these people manage to bring in CBDCs and phase out cash, like it's going to be a nightmare practically for people to operate in society. and I feel like things are going in that direction much faster now, with the RBI pushing CBDCs more heavily, and their plans to like onboard a lot of people to use those kind of things. So that is definitely one of my top concerns, which I want to like do a lot of work to resist. And the entire carbon side of things, like net zero, is a very very like huge looming threat on all of our heads. And if we don't put our effort into spreading awareness about that and really like educating people, the problem with the entire climate thing is it's again such a technical discussion, and it's very very difficult to get people because of the kind of propaganda involved to convince youngsters and all of that, and the youth icons who've been propped up to get their support. As I was saying earlier, like a lot of people just follow personality figures, which is why Bollywood actors and people like Greta and all are such big followings, and people go along with them. So we really need to put effort to change that and create our own kind of counter-cultural icons and narratives, which people can go for. So, like my effort is largely going to be directed. See, geopolitically, we can't really do much because other than stopping to fund our government, which might go and enter that war and like add to the bloodshed and mayhem. That's the only thing pretty much we can do. And of course, like spreading the right narratives about the war definitely helps to move the citizens' conscience in like one place or the other, which does help to put moral pressure on the government. But other than that, I feel like in practical threats like the climate and the monetary threat are the biggest. So I feel like that's where my energies will be invested personally, and also teaching people about the entire metaphysical side of things. Like that's always been a very big passion of mine, and it's something that people like a lot of people find woo and into the fringe and things like that. But I feel like that's like understanding that is what cracks the way to really making sense of what is going on the planet. So that, yeah, I mean that's something I've been working a lot to understand and like pass on to people with respect to my understanding and clarity and depth of knowledge that's I've been coming across, because I've managed to make my life pretty magical and synchronistic, like just applying some of the stuff I've been learning, and even in terms of just the kind of people or experiences or finances and everything I've been attracting into my life. Like we have
Great.
a lot of power inside us. Yeah.
You mentioned like magical and synchronistic. Can you provide an example?
Okay, so just I think this is last month, and I had a financial crunch, and I was kind of like wishing and praying that like there's techniques of manifestation that you can come across that Tom Montauk like really goes in depth into the science of synchronicity and how like quantum phenomena really land up attracting different experiences into your life through the power of your intention, and like just changing your mind and how it can change space time accordingly. So I was basically like following some of his techniques and trying to create some wealth because I was having a little shortage over there. Someone was supposed to give me like I think 10-20,000 many months back, and they'd forgotten about it and just not mentioned it. As soon as I did that, like in a couple of days, this person came and they like randomly donated 60,000 bucks to me. Like just out of nowhere. They were not they were supposed to give that amount. So I found that very fascinating. Even in terms of like, I actually wrote down all the synchronicities that were happening with me sometime 1.5 months back, because I was going through like a difficult time period 3-4 months back, and then working to change my mindset to just get myself back on track and get on with life. So in that period where I radically changed my mindset a lot with respect to just like reassessing my core beliefs and shifting my mental narratives and really like doing shadow work and figuring out like what is wrong with me up till that point, which manifested that kind of life, and trying to change that, because it's been a constant process over the years. Like I land up having experiences which teach me a lot about myself, and then I introspect and figure out like why did I come across those kind of incidents, and then work to get better. So that
Okay.
I was going through like a similar kind of process couple of months back, and then like just very very crazy things, just thinking about something and something appears right at the time, and syncing with people in terms of thoughts. Like I'm thinking something, someone else is thinking something at the same time, and crazy experiences, man. Like it's
Okay.
almost like reality is responsive to thought in some way, and everything is just mirroring whatever you're going through inside in a very very there are many other examples. Like there's certain things I've wanted in terms of friendships and women and all of that, and that's just been coming in. Like whatever I want is like I'm just making it happen somehow. So it's been very fascinating just like taking all of that in, and if more people land up applying that knowledge, like it can really transform people's lives in a very, very meaningful way. Sure.
Okay. So, I've been hearing this word a lot, shadow work. I don't know anything about it. And frankly, I'm the kind of person who's a little skeptical about things like this, or
Hmm.
astrology, or tarot cards, or crystal healing. I don't know how much, I don't know how credible it is. But what is the shadow work? How do you do it?
Basically, shadow work is a process where you're trying to analyze all the unideal aspects of yourself that you don't typically land up facing. It's about like pointing a mirror and taking a very, very honest look at everything that you can introspect about yourself, that you don't want to live by, that is not ideal for yourself. And by introspecting that, you try to go back in the past and figure out how those aspects of yourself have sabotaged your personal situations, your finances, the people you attract in your life, the experiences you have, and then try to work on that by reversing whatever issues you're going through with where you want to be. Like that's how I've pursued my shadow work. So just in the course of attracting some negative events in my life, like I was able to just look back at my past, analyze my patterns over the years, like okay, when I attracted this kind of person, I was in this kind of mindset and I believed these things, and then when I got with like the next person or the next set of friendships or whatever, like I was thinking like this, so that was being reflected back in my reality through those experiences. So that's ultimately like what shadow work comes down to. There are different techniques and ways of doing it, which I can like give you resources about. It's people have like spent a lot of time and mastered that area. Like Carl Jung and Freud were like some of the early people who came up with the concept of the shadow itself, and then a lot of psychologists and people like that have worked on it throughout the years. I think if you watch my interview with Bernard Gunther, we really like go into depth with shadow work and like tell people about some things they can practically apply in terms of changing that. But it's just a process where you stop running away from yourself, because a lot of us are just trying to distract ourselves with day-to-day things, and we get caught up with different kinds of things, and we don't land up facing ourselves or take responsibility for our inner world. So it's just about like taking full ownership of your mental state and your feelings and your belief systems, and just throwing everything in the garbage that doesn't suit you. But that can only come like when you analyze your triggers, when you're involved with certain people. Like a lot of stuff links back to childhood issues. So just becoming aware about your reaction to different things in your life, and like trying to work your way through, okay, why is it happening, like why did you react to something like that where another person would just have a normal reaction. It happens a lot, like when we see people we interact with in life, different people have different weak spots, and they react to something in some way because of the certain past they might have had or certain experiences they might have had. So it's all about like really doing deep inner work and figuring out those unideal patterns which are keeping your life stuck in a certain way, and then making the effort to move in the right direction mentally to manifest a different kind of life for you that you desire.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested. So, if I want to watch this interview of yours with Bernard Gunther, right? So,
Everything's on Odyssey. Yeah, yeah.
it's
Everything's
on
like backed
Odyssey.
up
Okay,
on
fine.
Odyssey or Twitter as well. Like you can just go on my feed and check it out over there.
Okay, since now your YouTube is gone, I want to know like what are you planning for this year? Because I've seen that in Bandra you've done many of these live events, and I know you'll be speaking at Bangalore in October at the Bitcoin conference. So, what are your immediate plans now?
Yeah, right now I'm just like kind of taking it easy, researching, traveling around a little bit. I plan to like get back in October, and then I'll start another YouTube channel, but I'll keep it reserved only for. I know the videos that got taken down the last time, and 99% of them, like the strikes I got, were about COVID only. It was only Kathy's video which they took down for like, which is kind of obvious, like given what Kathy's video went into, because she personally experienced child sex trafficking and abuse at the hands of some of the top like politicians in America. So other than that, like most of my videos were taken down for medical misinformation or like violating WHO policies or something like that. So I'll just probably be careful about not posting shit like that. The only reason I want to still stay on YouTube is because of the algorithm and the random people who come in. So yeah, that's pretty much my plan, and I'm planning to like scale up my Twitter and Instagram and stuff in a proper way, hire some people, and really like maximize the algorithm in a way where I can get more people as an entry point through short stuff, and then funnel them towards the more in-depth kind of conversations that can really change people's lives. So that's my plan. But I'm taking a break. Well, not a break exactly, but just like chilling out a little bit till October, and then I'll get back to it.
Yeah. All right, man. That's all the questions I've had. This was a very interesting conversation as always. Thanks, man, for
Always
coming
is,
on the
yeah,
lab.
man. Yeah, really like being here and always like your questions, Patam. Like very insightful conversation. Thank you so much.